Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Jethro Jones from Transformative Principal, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1...
Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome back to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name's Sam Fessich, and I'm here today with an amazing future teacher. Her name is Chancela Key, and we met, I think, last fall or last spring via Twitter, and her professor, Dr. Asim. So shout out to her. I will post her Twitter handle out on the show notes so you guys can connect with another amazing higher ed professional and an amazing future teacher. Chancela is studying elementary education at IUS, and she is super passionate about trauma-informed teaching. And I know that's a topic that a lot of you want to learn more about. I want to learn more about it too. So I'm so glad we have her on the show today. Chancela, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your teaching story? What got you inspired to be an educator? Did you have someone in your life that had spoken to your teaching journey or teaching story, or did you always want to be a teacher? Or tell us a little bit about your story.
So actually, I did not start out wanting to be a teacher. The first thing I ever remember about an idea of teaching entering my mind was actually in 7th grade PE class. And I had an amazing teacher. Her name was Miss Graham. And she always used me to help her coach people, which I don't know why. I don't know anything about sports. But one day she finally said, "Chance, I really think that you should be a teacher." And I'm like, "Okay, Miss Graham, you've lost your mind." No. And I just kept going through my school career, never really gave that much thought until my senior year. I had just had a rough way to go, just the wild kind of stuff that some teenagers do in high school, all the experimenting and crazy stuff, which is actually a big part of why I'm really passionate about trauma, because my childhood trauma led up to this really rough point in my life, which I'm still responsible for, but it kind of all just became this perfect storm that led to disaster. And I had a teacher that really, she poured into me over and over and over again, and I would try to push her away, and she was just constantly there loving me. And really, I don't know, this is cliche, but it's real. I don't know where I would be had she not been so persistent in reaching out to me. And so 2 weeks before I graduated, in January of 2013, I decided I'm going to be a teacher. Yeah, I was super excited, and I told this teacher, and she was like, "No, you can't do that." I had a really rough way to go. When I tried to get licensed in elementary education, she got licensed, and then it was a rough time trying to find a job, and ended up she became a high school teacher, which is how I met her. But she was a little freaked out about the idea at first, and I kind of backed off and took some time after graduating to reevaluate my whole life. Where am I at? How do I get away from the mess I grew up in and get to where I need to be, wherever that is? And so eventually I taught a pre-K class for a while and decided to switch my major to elementary education.
That, I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, maybe different parts of that story about having an influential educator in their life, or maybe having somebody speak into their life and say, "Oh, you don't want to do teaching. That's too hard. You don't get any respect. The pay is very little," or whatever the negatives may be. But having that mindset to push through that and follow your heart and follow your calling, I think that's incredible. So going along with your teaching story, as you're in college and you're getting up for those early classes and cramming for late nights, what is your why? Why do you want to be an educator of excellence for students? What drives you to keep going back?
I think really it's just, anywhere I go, I tend to automatically bond with, especially the children who are going through some rough things, whether it's a teenager, whether it's a 3-year-old. And just really, I don't think it's an accident that I can so deeply connect with these kids. And it's because of the hardship, but what breaks you makes you, right? So it's just constantly seeing these children, whether it's a child who really is doing okay and just needs some direction or just wants somebody to listen to them, or it's a child that's really not doing okay. And then I've also done jail ministry for 4.5 years. So I see these broken women. I've taken about a year off, but when you go into the jail, you see all of these broken little girls. You don't see these big, scary women. You just see where they have just been pushed down the line and ignored. And what if somebody would have stepped in? And so education is kind of this perfect in-between for those children who have nobody. I can step out into a public situation and just hope that I can have the wisdom to see which kids truly need somebody to listen, which kids are crying out for help by their behavior, by the things that everybody else excuses as bad behavior. That's really a cry for help.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, you talked about taking a year off.
So actually, I took a year off of the jail ministry itself. I decided last fall I was really getting overwhelmed with all of these just demands of the education, and I'm really involved in church ministry, and I just knew that if I was going to be able to move forward in a healthy way, I had to let go of some things. And it had been something I'd been praying about for a while, and I just really felt that God was just asking me to let that go for a season because it didn't belong to me in the first place. Something that I did for a time. And I mean, it changed me. And so ironically, I gave that up in somewhere around September. And then in October, all the trauma from my life hit me hard. It really caught up with me and sent me on a really, really, really hard journey. And since October, I have wonderful church family and friends, and they connected me with a biblical counselor that actually specializes in trauma in Indianapolis. And so I have been walking through my own and sifting through that since last October. And it's really taught me a lot about myself, but also given me so many tools to be able to take that into the classroom and to identify things that maybe I was acting a certain way as a kid or doing certain things that I just didn't understand until this past year, sifting through my own trauma. And I can clearly see that in another child now. And it's just amazing how it's all worked together.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. I think that piece of trauma-informed teaching can really fit into for always being an advocate for yourself and an advocate for your students and being able to reach them in ways that, meets them where they are. Would you mind talking a little bit more about your passion for trauma-informed care and some strategies or resources that my listeners can check out so they can get an idea of what this is, why it's important, and how we can learn more about it?
Yeah, sure. So I am by no means an expert. This is all very new to me. It was always there, but I'm just now getting connected to real resources that kind of put science to everything I've always felt and experienced. The book that I read this summer it set fire to a flame inside of me, and it's called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And the subtitle is And Other Stories from a Child Psychiatrist's Notebooks, What Traumatized Children Can Teach Us About Loss, Love, and Healing. And the author is Bruce D. Perry. He did all of his preliminary work, from what I understand from the book, in neurology, and he knew how the brain developed. He knew that the brain development was sequential. So it happened in order, it happened in a sequence. And then he ended up getting into child psychiatry. And there's this huge gap that, we study brain development and child development, but then we study child psychiatry completely independent of one another. And we have never merged those gaps, which only makes sense if a child develops a certain way, if a brain develops sequentially. And there's children over here that have been through trauma that happened as their brain was developing. It only makes sense to bridge those two things. And that's exactly what Bruce D. Perry did. Dr. Perry, he was just brilliant in the way he talks about it. So one resource that I have discovered, it is actually through that book, is he actually founded the Child Trauma Academy. And you could find that at childtrauma.org. And specifically for teaching, they have the neurosequential model in education. So if you go to childtrauma.org/NME, there's some resources to learn from some things there. The number one thing that I learned is just listen. A child, I don't necessarily think trauma-informed care, it's not a formula. It's not cut and dry. It's never the same. If you take that time, I know we have all the time in the world as teachers, right? But seriously, if you take 5 minutes a day to listen, what motivates them? I'm all about intrinsic motivation and helping them use what is already inside of them to move forward. So, anything we talk about, if we have a conversation with anybody, within the first few minutes, we'll probably get a pretty good idea of what they're passionate about or what they really love. And so you can kind of also use those things when they're having a hard time to just kind of help calm them down. Tell me about something that you really like to do or what makes you feel safe. Adapt your expectation to meet the needs of your children in your classroom.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's so important to listen, to communicate, and to really hear the students that you're talking to and engage in those conversations that you're able to look in and see what, like you said, what motivates them and where they may struggle, where some of their fears are, but being able to communicate and have a conversation is it's all about building that relationship first, and then that content will come.
It's just if a child doesn't feel safe and trust you, they can't learn much of anything from you, not because they don't have the ability, but because if you're in this fight or flight moment constantly, there's no logic involved in that. You have to create that environment of trust and safety.
Thank you for that. So when it comes to teaching and your teaching career thus far, do you have a favorite teaching moment that you'd like to share with my listeners?
Last semester, I was in a first grade classroom, and the kids were just so full of energy and sweet. They were just wonderful. But there were several who did have, those signs of trauma, just the acting out, the aggressive behavior, the dissociation where they're withdrawing from everything. And one of the students was very much withdrawn from everything, bored all the time. Her actual teacher did worry a little bit about her home life, but there was nothing obvious to be able to report. It was just clear that the student needed somebody to care. And so we had to do a 5-day intervention in math and reading. And so I chose to do my 5-day math intervention with this student. And I was very concerned, is she going to like anything I plan? How in the world do I make these interventions something that is actually beneficial to her and something that she likes, something that she knows I'm spending time with her because she matters, and I want to plan things that she will care about. And so I was so nervous about that. And so at the end of the 5-day intervention, I did several little games with her. And the day prior we had done, so the day 4, we had done a little mock shopping game. And so I had from the Dollar Tree this little shopping basket with fruits and veggies. And I made a little sheet with prices, a little order form. You would have to pay me in the exact change. And she really liked all the activities. And so the last day of intervention, we did something else. And at the end, she said, "Can we do that shopping game, please?" And I said, "Well, sweetie, we're out of time. I would love to do that some other time, just not right now. But I'm so glad you liked it." And she kind of just got this blank stare on her face. And I'm thinking, oh no, help. And I was just waiting to see what she wanted to say. And she said, "You're the only thing that makes me go to school." And it took everything in me not to just absolutely lose it, because it wasn't anything special I did. It wasn't anything in me that I'm like, oh, I'm this awesome teacher and I really know what I'm doing. It was the fact that I did what I was supposed to do with intentionality and made her feel seen. And just that moment just completely changed me.
And I think we can all learn from that. Being an intentional educator truly can make a difference in a student's life. Being intentional with your lessons, what's going to interest your students, what's going to help them grow. And you can also get your content out there. But meeting them where they are and then pushing them a little further can really help them to learn and grow. What is some of your best advice about teaching that you ever received, and how do you incorporate it into your everyday?
Oh, goodness. So I can't pinpoint exactly who said what. It all kind of mixes together. But this theme that I've heard over and over again is really just to pay attention to your students. Do only what you can do. Don't expect yourself to be above and beyond and everything, just to put yourself out there and make everybody know that you're the greatest. Like, be in the present and do what you can with what you have. I recently, with the lady I'm student teaching under, she is wonderful. We went to some trainings and she gave me so much practical advice about the room. Basically, only do what you can do. But when we went to these trainings, she said, best advice I could give you for these trainings is to take 2 or 3 things from each training you go to, because there is a lot of content, there is a lot of information, and it will be completely overwhelming if you try to take in everything. Pick 2 or 3 things, write them down, and try to apply them in your classroom that year.
I love that piece of advice. It's so true. If you're going to a conference or professional development or an ed camp, pick 2 or 3 things that you can implement during that school year and try to implement that to make yourself better each year, so you can keep building upon those skills instead of thinking, oh, I have to do all these different things. Pare it down to 2 or 3. I love that piece of advice. All right, Chancela, thank you so much for your time today. How can my listeners find you online and connect with you?
Okay, so my Twitter is @MissKey_2019.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm sure they'll be connecting with you. And remember, friends, all the resources that Chancela mentioned today will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Chancela. Is there anything else you want my listeners to know?
Just don't get discouraged. Just find, like I said, find what you love and key in on that, because your passion will take you far.
It really will. It really will. Thank you so much for your time. And remember, friends, you have the Edu Magic within you.
There you have it, Edu Magicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more Edu Magic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the Edu Magic within you.